Auzu billahi samiyul alim minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. We welcome you to another session on book reading. Actually, we present summaries of books that our scholars have read, uh, usually in recent past. And today we have two books which we'll be presenting summary of. One is Man's Search for Meaning, and the second one is A Short History of Distributive Justice. And with me, the first book, Man's Search for Meaning. The summary of this book will be presented by my friend Murtaza Bashir. So without wasting your time, precious time, I call upon my friend Murtaza Bashir to present a summary of this book, Man's Search for Meaning. So he has approximately 10 to 15 minutes at his disposal, and he can utilize that time. So over to you, Murtaza.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Wa alaikum assalam.
Thank you, Brother Ajaz Saab, for creating this such a wonderful series of book summaries. I think this is the first time that I have realized how to read a book. Though I have before this I have read How to Read a Book by Adler, but I don't think I have really understood that book. Now, while when this task was put for kept before me, that I have to present the summary of the books. Now I realized actually what it means to read a book properly. Thank you for this wonderful program. In this session, I'm going to present the summary of this very book, Man's Search for Meaning. This book is written by Viktor Frankl. Actually, he is a survivor in the Holocaust, which is very well known. What happened with the Jews in Germany in the aftermath of Second World War. So far, the genre of this very book is concerned, in the vast world of literature, this book can be considered as an autobiography. This can be considered as a memoir. This can be considered as a book of psychology as well, because so far the Viennese school of psychology are concerned, there are two schools. One is Sigmund Freud's, that is basically it is psychoanalytical psychology, or it is will to power, what Sigmund Freud put forward, the quest of man's quest for pleasure. And second one was by Alfred Adler, that is will to power. That's actually, it's the quest of man for asserting his own individual personality, that is quest for power. And this book is considered as book which presents a third school of psychology, properly Vienna schools of psychology which are there. That is Viktor Frankl put forth that actually it is the quest for meaning, which is the driving force of man's life. So this very book is a very small book. This is hardly 154, 160 pages. And this book is spread over 3 chapters. In the first chapter, actually, since Viktor Frankl, he has himself been in the concentration camps. He had lived almost 3 years in 4 concentration camps. He had been to Auschwitz, he had been to Dachau, he had been to other concentration camps. And there, while bearing all sort of those horrendous things which Hitler's, Hitler's regime inflicted on the Jews, he narrates the story. First chapter deals with those very horrendous, very inhuman things which Viktor Frankl underwent in the Auschwitz. And then in the second chapter, actually, while being in the concentration camps, he develops a sort of inference from that very reflection, what happened with them in the Auschwitz. Then he put first another, which is considered as what I earlier said, that third school of psychology. That's how it is quest of man for meaning. That is considered in psychological terms logotherapy. Like we have, psychotherapy. Likewise, there is logotherapy. And then third chapter deals with the tragic optimism. Basically, there are only just 3 chapters. They are very broad essays. One, the experience in the concentration camps. Second, the logotherapy. And then it is the tragic optimism. So for the first chapter concerned, the experience in the concentration camps, what Viktor Frankl says, actually, he says, once somebody goes in the concentration camps, there is immeasurable or unimaginable suffering there in the concentration camps. For example, when he starts the book, he says, first thing that you lose in that you lose in the Auschwitz, in the concentration camp, that is, you lose humanness. You lose yourselves. You are not anymore Victor or ABCD. You get a prison number and you are called there by that very number. Simply, you are reduced to a number. And second, nobody calls you by even numbers. Sometimes they just call you by gestures, like we give gestures to animals. And besides, you have to do very inhuman things there. Then a situation arises where you lose meaningful pursuits to life, which normally a person have in his life. Then he says, actually, in those very sufferings, life gets reduced to very, very in essential things, like you have to think how you can escape from that very laborious things they were compelled to do there. Or you have to think about whether you are getting meals today, whether you are getting a full bread piece today, or how you can manage to have few cigarettes in the concentration camp. Actually, in this very chapter, experience in the Auschwitz, he's not quoting every event. He's quoting only those very events where from he can get that sort of psychological inference. For example, he says there are prisoners. Some prisoners are known as capos. They are they have given some sort of trusteeship in the prison. They have to look after other prisoners. Then he tries to delineate upon their psychology. Then, for example, he comes out with such an inference that actually across any genre of groups, you don't have that sort of good and bad. Actually, he said there are decent and indecent people. Among those very who were the people who were managing the affairs of the prison, there were good capos and there were bad capos. For example, in the concentration camp, he says actually only those very people survived there who were able to think beyond this very suffering. For example, he quotes, for example, there is a prisoner who's seeing a dream, and in the dream he's saying that at this very date they are going to be released from the camp. But when that date is reached, they don't get released. Then he sees after post to that very date, that very prisoner is losing that hope. As a result, he's not seeing any meaning to his life anymore. As a result, his life withers, and at the end he dies in the prison. Besides that, for example, he quotes Nietzsche. Approvingly, he quotes the words of Nietzsche, Friedrich Nietzsche, the great philosopher, that if you can locate the why of your life, then obviously always how is pending before you. You can get how it is possible. He sees the gas chambers in the Auschwitz. Every day the people are put into the gas chambers. They are lost in the grayness of the sky like smokes. But he says how this was possible for me to survive such horrendous condition. He says actually I was thinking, for example, when I was put into the Auschwitz, I was having the manuscript of the book that was snatched from me, that was thrown into some fire. Then in some symbols, I tried to wrote my manuscript again, and I was thinking a day is coming when I will be out of these very abysmal conditions, and I'm going to again write this very manuscript. He's thinking as a psychologist, he has to roam across America and Europe, and he is going to give the lectures again. He's thinking about his wife in the concentration camp, that while he will go out of the concentration camp, he'll surely going to meet his wife. This inference that actually a man, if he's not able to foresee something in the future, in the posterity, no matter what horrendous conditions he's facing, then they become very simple. He gives the examples of many prisoners, those who are not able to push their imagination beyond certain limits. Actually, they succumb to those very abysmal situations. So he comes out and he very, uh, then there is second chapter. Then there is very second chapter, that's logotherapy. Okay. Then there is second chapter, logotherapy. Then he tries to how we can get that meaning, develop this meaning of life. He gives three ways to carve out the meaning of life. One is doing some meaningful work, having some meaningful engagement. Second is by love, having some good relation with anyone. With, for example, in case of Frankel, we see he's always thinking about his wife, and he says it is not only physical relation; it is some sort of spiritual relation. A person whom you miss, about whom, with whom you see future very bright. Then third is courage. In when there is suffering, a colossal suffering, then a man can show a courage. These are the three ways in which he says logotherapy can help us: carving out the meaning, a good engagement, a work, and then love, and then a courageous attitude. And in the final chapter, that is tragic optimism, he says actually there are certain tragedies, what he called logotherapical triads. One is guilt, another is pain, and then there is death. You can't transcend these very painful aspects of the life. Then he says actually it is the optimum, how we can get in consonance with these very things. That is, if there is pain, this pain will make me strong. If there is guilt means I'm feeling something bad about me. I have to get myself in some best version. And then in the third aspect, in the death, he says death is showing us a culminating phase of our life. When there's some culminating phase of our life, it makes us responsible. We are having a very limited period of time. In that very limited period of time, we have to be very responsible. So he says actually overall that, for example, he quotes one of the literary giants of German literature, Dostoevsky, that man can get used to anything, but don't ask me how. This is quote unquote. Man can get used to anything, but don't ask me how. This is actually, he says, potentially human life is meaningful. And in the last chapter, he delineates upon the European culture, that how this is so prevalent, meaningless in their lives. Actually, even he goes on to the existential philosophy. He critiques that. How come when you say that existence which precedes the essence? No, there is some potential meaning to the life. And for example, he says people exist out of some existential frustrations, like there is joblessness. But he goes on to say, actually, joblessness is not uselessness. If somebody is not getting the job, that doesn't mean he's useless. We are equating it with his uselessness, and uselessness is equated with its meaninglessness. Actually, he says in that consumeristic culture, you are having abundance of means for achieving those very trivial things, but you lack essentially the meaning. And even present in our own society, when we say there's a rampant culture of suicide nowadays, he can be quoted. He says, okay, meaninglessness cannot be considered as the sole reason for the suicide cultures. But surely, if people are helped to locate their meanings, they can be saved. They can be saved from developing these very impulses, where they just they just throw their lives away. Do I have any more time?
Yes, you can take 2-3 minutes.
Okay. So overall, this is a very brilliant book in contemporary times, where there is nihilism, absurdism, and the suicide culture is so much prevalent. Actually, the three things which he essentializes, that is a meaningful engagement in the life. Everybody has to try to carve out that very why he can be meaningful. And this is prevalent even among the people who are, affluent, who are having every sort of thing which we see. This is very much important for the life. And there is a class who says, if we get those very things, then life will be okay. But not such is not the case with the life. Number one is,
Engagement.
locating this meaning in the life. And second is, for example, working. First is deed, another is work. This is work, and another is love. We have to try to develop a relation with our community, with our near ones, with whom we can spend best time. And third one is courage. We have to be what Dostoevsky says. Humans are exceptional species. They can do wonders on this very planet. If we can ingrain this very thing in ourselves, that we are having some exceptional abilities, then we can overcome this negative culture and we can give meaning to our lives. Thank
you. Thanks, Murtaza, for your in-depth analysis and summary of this very book, which is a very wonderful book, and all of us, I think, should take chance and time to read this very book. So I'm going to make a presentation, present a summary of what I think is one of the most important books that I have read. And its name is A Short History of Distributive Justice. It is about distributive justice, and its author is Samuel Fleischaker. It was published in 2004, Harvard University Press. Now, first we will, the author first talks about, defines distributive justice. Now, when we talk about distributive justice in the current times, it means allocation of resources or reallocation of resources among individuals with competing needs or claims. So we will simplify it. It actually would mean in its most simplest form that we have to take resources from rich people and redistribute those resources among poor, or we have to collect resources from rich areas and redistribute those resources to the poor areas. So this is one of the things that we see very common in socioeconomic policies in different countries today, and it is a sort of a norm, very accepted type of a thing, very important cornerstone of our policies. But what he makes a big claim about this very distributive justice concept is that it is actually only 200 years old concept, and practically we can say it is about some 50 or 70 years old concept. And this is a novelty that he brings forth in this very book. So he says that what we believe is common today, the meaning of notion of distributive justice, is actually 2 centuries old only. And there is something we can call as pre-modern and now modern concepts of distributive justice. Now, this whole actually idea emanates from, the reason for this idea is that people believe that Adam Smith, he denied the concept of distributive justice, and Samuel Fleischaker says that actually he was, you can say, loosely, he denied the modern view of distributive justice, but he upheld the pre-modern view of this distributive justice. And about Adam Smith, he says that he was at the point of inflection regarding the concept, the changing concept of distributive justice, because he himself mentions this very thing, that there's a shifting emphasis, or the meaning of this very term is changing currently. That was said by Adam Smith. And he also says that he was the last major thinker to use this very term from pre-modern perspective. And then he says that he marks an end to the previous era of the use of the word distributive justice. And it was not the case that Adam Smith rejected this very notion of distributive justice. He was actually the last major thinker to uphold this very term from the pre-modern perspectives. Now, in the first chapter, he elaborates different perceptions about justice, or how we looked at what we today call as distributive justice, or what people had notions about how we should take care of the poor people. Now, he begins with Aristotle in his first chapter, and he says that he had 2 ideas, 2 concepts about this justice. One was distributive justice, and the second was corrective or commutative justice. Now, when it comes to distributive justice, the meaning upheld, the notion upheld by Aristotle was that A person who is, for example, meritorious and he puts in efforts, he should be provided the fruits of his hard work, and therefore what he gets should be based on the merit. So it is not the modern notion of distributive justice, obviously. And the second is corrective, where we punish people or compensate those who have been wronged. This is second. Then he talks about Cicero, again almost the same meaning. Now he has justice has got two notions, or two types over here. One is compulsory, which is again what Aristotle called corrective or commutative justice, and another is actually we use loosely the term justice when we are to take care of those people who don't have the means to take care of themselves. But he calls it is actually beneficence. It is actually a voluntary type of an engagement, which is not compulsory for people from the legal perspective. Then we have Aquinas, and again he uses almost Aristotle's this classification of justice into two categories. Then we have Hugo Grotius, again almost the same. Then we have Samuel Pufendorf, again he calls there's something we call as imperfect right, and we have imperfect right, imperfect rights and perfect rights. Now perfect rights are those we can say, as this Aristotle said, that it was corrective or commutative justice, and imperfect is which cannot be legally actually enforced. Then he moves on to the next topic, next issue in his first chapter. It is the right of necessity. How people thought about when people were in dire conditions, dire needs, what would they be doing? Now he talks first about Aquinas, who said that under dire circumstances, those people who are in dire circumstances, they can use somebody else's property, and it is a sort of a right at that time, but only when all the other options are exhausted. Now Grotius again says almost the same as Aquinas, but he says that they use that very thing which belongs to some rich person if they don't have and they are in dire circumstances, but they have to restore it back later on. Hume almost the same. Adam Smith again, he said that if it is most urgently needed, then we can use somebody's wealth. But largely the perspective they had, how we have to take care of the poor, is that the rich have to show beneficence, they have to show mercy on the poor and give charity, etc. That will be the way that poor will be catered in a society. Then he talks about third issue. He connects with this very phenomenon of distributive justice. The pre-modern perspective is property rights. Aquinas says property rights, individual property rights, are not only legitimate, but they are completely necessary. And Aquinas, he rejects religious asceticism. He rejects apostolic poverty. Grotius again says that property rights are essential, they must not be violated. Locke says that property comes from labor and taxation needs permission. Hume says private property is problematic, but still the best thing. And Adam Smith almost says the same thing, but he he was actually sowing the seeds of what could be called as communism or socialism or distributive justice, as we will come to know about later on. But the basic point here is that they defined property rights in such a way that it left no scope for distributive justice, taking property from rich people and then giving that property to the poor people, for example. Then he talks about fourth issue he brings over here is communal experiments and utopian writings. He says Plato, Thomas More, we have Thomas Campilla, we have Apostles. They talked about some sort of communism. And they talked about egalitarian traditions. But again, he emphasizes over here is what he emphasizes over here is that this was not out of the consideration of justice with the poor. It had other objectives. For example, these could be political objectives, like we have for Plato. We have spiritual objectives for example, religious people, prevention of crime for some other people. So the point here is the consideration was not justice to poor, but something else. Then he talks about poor laws, and again he says that the notion of poor law, this distributive justice, is implicit in poor laws, but they were a sort of a moral duty. They put forward a moral duty and not a legal one. It was a religious right, not a civil right for the people to be given this the donations from the poor fund, and it was largely managed by the religious churches, etc. Then he moves on to the second chapter, and he brings forth the 18th century scenario, and he says that there was a sea change during the 18th century towards poor and poverty. And he says that social hierarchy was getting the emphasis on social hierarchy was loosening its weight, and then social mobility was gaining its momentum. Social transformation in the 18th century was such that it was a point of inflection uh, between the pre-modern and modern times. Now he brings forth some 3-4 important figures in this. One is Rousseau, who said that his influence was on French revolutionaries, then on Kant, then on leftists. Now he said he was the person who said poverty, inequality is bad, it is not good, it corrupts politics. But again, consideration was political. Then we have Adam Smith. A lot of things are about this Rousseau, which we cannot discuss over here. Then he moves on to Adam Smith, and again, Adam Smith, as I said, was sowing the seeds of actually communism, because he talks about merchants getting the maximum benefit, least labor. Then the next tier comes clerks, they also get benefits, but less hard work. Artisans, they have to work more, but less benefits. But laborers, who bear the brunt of this entire phenomenon, they get the least amount and they live in obscurity. Otherwise, they are the ones who uphold the entire system. Now, Adam Smith contributed to distributive justice in 2 ways. One is he put forward distributive policies, that we should have direct transfers, should have taxation, taxing rich, and then providing public amenities to the poor. And then we have attitude towards poor and poverty that was brought forth by Adam Smith. He said that it was previously it was believed that poor were indolent, they were bad, poverty was natural, it was necessary, and even they were spendthrifts, they were bad, therefore they are poor. But Adam Smith said that poor are equal in dignity, they are actually now underprivileged, poverty is a harm, therefore they behave the way they behave, or they act the way they act. Then he talks about Immanuel Kant. Again, Immanuel Kant gave a lot of emphasis on property rights on the one hand, but at the same time, he gave a good deal of emphasis on state obligation towards the poor. One thing Immanuel Kant did was that he dismissed the right of necessity, as well as he dismissed the notion of charity. Actually, he didn't want charity to be the main organ of looking after the poor, and he laid more emphasis on state aid rather than charity, because he said the people who give charity, it is out of pleasure, objective, and it is not reliable in the long run. It is based on hierarchy of givers and takers. So he wanted to undo this very thing, because he wanted to use, instead of needs approach, he wanted to use the righteous approach. And he laid emphasis on this very thing, that the poor were equally worth like the rich people, and human cultivation was the objective of human society. Therefore, we need to take care of the poor as well. It is an objective of the society as a whole, and therefore the taxes should be collected and they should be spent on the poor people. But again, Immanuel Kant, he was not explicit with regard to distributive justice, that it should be done the way we think about this in current times. Then we have one of the important figures in French Revolution, or among the French revolutionaries. Its name is Gracchus Babeuf, who in 1796 said, first explicitly proclaimed that it's a matter of justice. Justice requires that state should redistribute goods to the poor. So he connects the redistribution with justice over here, and that is one of the basic themes of this very book. Yes, people use it to give charity, so on and so forth, but it wasn't considered an obligation of justice for the society, but he was the first one who brought it forth. And it was a new concept, though with certain limitations, but he put it forward. And the maximum credit that he gives to is John Rawls, whose 1971 book, A Theory of Justice, was a path-breaking book. Now, after Babeuf, he says that distributive justice entered into the political discourse, and many books were written about distribution of wealth. But the term distributive justice became widespread only after World War II. And Largely, the meaning of this very term, distributive justice, was that greater share should be given to those who work hard, that is the labor class, and the second, that those people who cannot work, who cannot earn earn for themselves, they should be taken care of. This was what the domain of distributive justice no, entailed, included, and there was some politicization of poverty once this discourse no, started. Now we have then Franklin Roosevelt New Deal, and in that it was said that right to a home, a job, education, protection from sickness, accidents, and unemployment. This was a fundamental right for the poor. And now it was made a sort of a fundamental right. Otherwise, earlier, not a fundamental right, just a basic right. In a society, in a state, when the state was becoming a welfare state. Now, he talks about four classes over here from 1796, from Babeuf to John Rawls, who contributed positively or negatively to the notion of distributive justice. And one is the people who reacted to the Babeuf's idea of just distributive justice. And it includes Joseph Townsend, we have Thomas Malthus, we have Edmund Burke, and many other, Herbert Spencer and others who criticized this very notion of distributive justice, because they thought they believed in a thesis, we can say, which is called as poor person exceptionalism, and they believed that poor need to be treated the same way as was done with them in the history, because they are not the same as others, and they believed that it is having utility for the world. They are poor, it is having a utility for the world. They believe that they are intrinsically inferior. They believe they are indolent and vicious people. They believe that it is advantageous that they should be suffering. And some of them believe that we should kill them in war. Some believe that we should eat poor babies. Some believe that we should abolish poor laws. Others believe it, let them die quickly. Some believe that it's a drain to society, and some believe in the survival of the fittest. All of these notions going against to the notion of distributive justice. Then we have positivists, Saint Simon, we have Auguste Comte, we have James Mill, etc. They also contributed to this very notion, but they were sort of ultra scientific. They didn't believe in ethical and ideal theories and approach. They were atomists. They believed in observation, not in abstract thought. So they in principle believed in distributive justice, but because of their positivist considerations, they didn't bring forward this very notion explicitly. Then we have Karl Marx. Now, again, he believed in the notion of an ideal society, where obviously there was no need for redistribution of wealth from rich to the poor. There was no need for distributive justice, because we were already living in his ideal was that very ideal society where such a problem would not arise. Therefore, he also didn't pick up this very notion and elaborate it. Then we have utilitarians who were concerned with the happiness, satisfaction of the maximum. We have Jeremy Bentham, we have William Thompson, J.S. Mill, Alfred Marshall, and Jeremy Bentham being one of the earliest to propose welfare programs for the poor. But again, they were utilitarians. Ethical philosophy was not well suited to the idea of distributive justice. They believed in good of society rather than good of individuals, and obviously poor were more individuals than society. Society was run by obviously the rich people. Now we come to Rawls, and he says all reaction with regard to distributive justice or this very notion can be clubbed into these four categories that we talked about: the reactionaries, the positivists, Marxists or socialists, and then utilitarians. Now let's come to John Rawls. Now, one of the basic departures that John Rawls had with utilitarians was that he emphasized, he put forward individualistic approach. Actually, one thing is there, he is on the one hand he puts forward this individual approach, on the other hand he puts the onus on the society, and that has a very important reason. He believes that, as many other believed beforehand, like Marcus, that personal character was determined by society. It was not of our working. And even our own abilities, which would be thought very personal and ours otherwise, he challenged this very notion. He said that it is not of our making. Leave aside those qualities which are because of our family backgrounds, or we live in a particular locality. So if personal character is determined by the society, it is not of our making. Therefore, distribution of the wealth should also be determined by the society, because both these things are societal phenomenon. So fair distribution, it should be a societal arrangement. It should be within the structure of the society. And over here, he ignores the individual. But as I said, he laid a strong emphasis on the importance of individual. He says that each person possesses an inviolability founded on justice that even the welfare of society as a whole cannot override, because that was against the utilitarians, their approach. Now, he distinguishes between primary goods and ultimate goods, that he says that primary goods should be available to all the people, which are essential to sort of life. Then the concept of justice that he has in mind is that it should be a set of principles which would delineate social arrangements for the division of the benefits that a society produces, and about which there should be consensus in the society. Now, over here, this is the first time that somebody is telling us that distributive justice is something very fundamental. It is fundamentally related with justice. Distribution of the property, of the wealth, is something fundamentally related with justice. And somebody is developing a philosophy on the basis of that. Now, distributive justice, according to him, is based on the precept, on the principle of need, and he is looking for a complete and consistent concept of justice. Now, let's come to the principles of justice that he puts forward. It is an elaborate discussion. Obviously, it cannot be captured within a short time, but two things are very important over here. One is that there should be equal basic liberties should be there. You might have studies the concept of the wheel of ignorance of Rawls. So he says that equal basic liberties should be for everyone. So when it comes to civil liberties, it should be for everyone. Now, how do we manage now economic inequalities? He says two things about that. One is that the greatest benefit to the least advantage, if it is taking place, then we should allow for socio-economic inequalities. That is, if a person has ideas, he has business which can progress a lot, let it go forward. But at the same time, we need to be careful that its benefits are percolating to the lowest members of the society from an economic perspective. And then he says that there should be fair equality of opportunity. So if we are in sort of a meritocratic society, the facilities that should be available should be equal for all, so that there is level playing field, that all compete on the same terms. And he wants to explicate a theory of justice that is fundamentally which is not fundamentally in its principles, which is not controversial. And he has been largely very successful, though obviously there will be criticism of his basic principles. Now, he then moves on to those people who came after Rawls, and then there are obviously some people who are following the Rawlsian tradition, some people who are criticizing him, and those who follow that very tradition, they move this very this very phenomenon forward that John Rawls has put forward. And one of the things they have focused upon is the scope of distribution. That is, which are the goods that should be distributed actually, and how much should be distribution there. Now, some people would say that resources should be distributed, other civil liberties, then primary goods, happiness, capabilities, as Amartya Sen has emphasized. So there is debate forward. Then how much? There is strict equality. Some people believe in strict equality, and some people believe in guaranteed minimum. And I think most of the world today follows this guaranteed minimum sort of a phenomenon. Then again, he says that between whom should this be distributed and who will be the distributing agency? Again, it is the state which has to play the role of distributing these things. and then it is the citizens. So it is a phenomenon related with state and citizens. So there's we can't say it is a thing which is actually related to the individual of this globe, because obviously if we are living in a particular country, generally other country doesn't take it part of its responsibility that it should cater to our needs. So then we have libertarian challenge. Again, we have Robert Nozick, who is against this very notion of distributive justice. And then there is extension of distributive justice. We have constricted view, we have expansive view, some restricted, some expanded to many other things. Then in epilogue, he mentions why should we studying the concept of distributive justice, its history in particular, and in general history of any phenomenon or idea. He says that it is because it shows us the complexity that surrounds a particular idea. He says that he just emphasizes that once we do it, we come to realize why this notion of distributive justice came on a particular time and not before. And then he emphasizes that how change in the sensibilities of the people was instrumental in bringing forth the concept of distributive justice from the modern perspective. And then why we endorse or reject an idea, and if we have to do that, the history of the idea is playing a very fundamental role. And then he says finally it offers us a critical distance from an idea from which we can impassionately understand a particular idea. So these are the types of things, or this is what I have learned from this very book, Distributive Justice. I try to present this summary about this. It is Distributive Justice by Samuel Phyllis Shaker. I hope that you would have enjoyed this very summary of this book. Murtaza, your comments.
Surely, this was a wonderful hearing.
Thank you very much, all.
And I think
Yes,
Ron has been really good. Mine was, it was something introspection.
No.
Inside a man. And it went outside distributive justice.
Actually, mine is actually a historical account. Therefore, you can construct it this way, and it is presented this way, obviously, in the book. Therefore, I have followed it all along. And the book that you presented summary of is entirely different genre. Therefore, obviously, what you did with that was the right thing to do. And I hope that all our viewers would be liking this very the sessions that we have on book reading or presentation of book summaries. And if you have some to share with us book summaries, then you are most welcome to join us on our YouTube channel and Facebook page. You can contact us, and we can share those what you have learned from different books. We thank you for listening to us patiently on these two books that we have presented. I take this opportunity to thank my friend Murtaza Bashir for taking. He is a busy man, taking his time for this presentation. Obviously, you have to prepare a lot before you make a presentation of the particular book. And inshallah ta'ala, I hope that we will continue to do this, because it is very important in our own personal growth. We read books and we learn a lot of things from our books, from the books which we read. Thank you very much.